Beth and Jen are ready. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the National Association of Adoptees and Parents. This is the Adoption Happy Hour, and we're very pleased to have you here today. And we are, of course, an organization that strives to integrate parts of the adoption constellation. So whether you're an adoptive parent, a first parent, or an adoptee, we're glad to have you here. And our intent is to unify the adoption community, elevate diverse voices by promoting dialogue, understanding, and healing through education, awareness, and connection. My name is Greg Gentry. I am a domestic infant adoptee from California, from the baby scoop era, and I'll be your host tonight. Certainly glad to have everybody here, and I'm really excited to have a wonderful guest here. We'll introduce him momentarily. That's Cordan James. But before that, let's get to some of our housekeeping. Beth, if you'd like to introduce us to that. So again, we are the National Association of Adoptees and Parents, and these are some of the bylaws just to make sure that we have a great experience in here. Please remain on mute, raise your hand or hand on screen or the virtual hand to be recognized when it's time to speak. And please feel free to use the posts in the chat for comments or questions. If you are experiencing a serious mental health event or suicidal thoughts, please contact a licensed professional or the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline by dialing 988. And a reminder that this is a public meeting, so there should be no expectation or guarantee that information or identity is confidential in here. And portions of this event are recorded and may be shared in our private happy hour group on Facebook and on our YouTube channel. Thank you. Any announcements, Beth?
Yes.
Great.
As always, we'd like to remind you of all of the programming that NAAP has, or maybe this is a first time for you here tonight. And so we want you to know all of the things that we have going on. Happy Hour comes to you the first and the third Friday of each month with an array of guests from across the constellation on a variety of topics. And we've been fortunate to be doing this. We are in our 5th year of bringing Happy Hour to you on Friday nights, and that's pretty exciting. We also have 3 other programs. We have Dr. Joyce McGuire-Pavo, who hosts Putting Yourself Together After Reunion. This is a once monthly group. It's usually on the 2nd or 3rd Tuesday of the month. It was just this past Tuesday, and next month it will be the 18th again. It will be March 18th coming up again. She is a pro at helping us navigate this reunion journey that many of us are on. One of our other programs is hosted by Amy Seek, and that is First Families, Birth Parents Journeying Together. That group meets on the 2nd Thursday of each month, and that will be coming up on the 13th of March. Another really unique and good way for you to connect with the constellation. And then our newest program is Migrating Toward Wholeness, Rewriting Adoption Narratives in the Constellation. That is facilitated by Dr. Liz DeBetta, and they will meet yet this month, as their normal meeting time is the 4th Thursday of the month, so they will be here on the 28th. And so you can see there's a variety of things. Just about every week there is some way for you to connect with the adoption community through NAAP. And that is it for me.
Thank you, Beth. And so I'd like at this time to welcome our guest and introduce him to you. So Cordan James is a father, an adoptee, a decorated combat veteran, an entrepreneur, and an inspiration to his community for sure. And one of Cordan's great joys is investing in the lives of kids through his Comeback Kid Mentorship Program. And we'll have a great look about that in the coming moments here. And Cordan's also someone I'm proud to call a friend, someone local to me, a big proponent of meeting people in person when you can. And I've had a chance to spend time with Cordan in person, and I believe those connections are so important. And tonight, we'll be watching Cordan's 2024 TED Talk, which is titled From Abandonment to Empowerment, A Journey of Resilience. And additionally, speaking with Cordan afterward, learning more about his story and the valuable work he's engaged in. Cordan, welcome to NAAP. We're so glad to have you, and it's great to talk to you again.
It's absolutely beautiful to be here for the first time and just witness everything that you are doing for programs and to see how involved everyone is. I think it's a beautiful, safe space to end a Friday on, you know?
Great. So excited. And again, I'm so comfortable speaking with you. We've had some great interactions over the years, and you were one of the first people I interviewed in Fireside Adoptees, going back either to late 2021 or to 2022 early. And I had just moved to Florida at the time, and when I was excited to be moving back to New England, I knew we'd finally have a chance to connect in person. So really have enjoyed just getting to know you. I know for a time we were in the same town. We were both up in Manchester, and I
Right.
moved down a little bit, but I'm still close to you, and we're experiencing this great weather together. But really looking forward to seeing the presentation, the TED Talk, Cordan. I know you've put your heart into that, and we're honored to be able to share that, to see that with you, and then spend some more time talking with you if you'd like to present that.
Absolutely. I look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And just give me a thumbs up, just letting me know how the sound is. Thank you.
I stand here today as an accomplished man, a veteran, a college student, an entrepreneur, a mentor, and a father of three, the last of which I'm most proud. But nothing in my earliest life positioned me to be here today. Let me tell you why. It goes back a couple of generations, beginning with my grandparents and their 4 kids, 3 sons and a daughter, raised in the heart of Los Angeles, California. Well, they started off well. In time, they would divorce, and their children would remain with my grandfather. Their little girl, who would one day be my mom, was about 5 years old at the time.
How important is it for us to improve the quality of our emotional and mental health in all relationships?
She felt abandoned by the person she needed most, her mother. She carried that sense of loss with her for years. And this would shape the way that she would live her life and how her future turned out. 4 years later, though, when my mom was 9, her mother regained custody. But their reunion was short-lived. My grandmother passed away when my mom was 15, leaving her to confront with the pain and abandonment once again, without the resilience to move forward with strength. Overcome by grief, she turned to smoking, drinking, and experimenting with heroin in high school, seeking comfort in all the wrong places. She got caught up in a lifestyle of gangs, of drugs, of money during the cocaine-filled 80s. 19 when she had her first child, a baby girl. My mom was still at home with my grandfather, though. And despite her new responsibilities, she continued living recklessly, often leaving her child behind with family. She had another baby girl, leaving her with different people as well, so she could return back to the streets. And her addiction became relentless. By the time my mom was 26, she started using cocaine, which quickly escalated to crack cocaine. This cost her custody of her children and her daughters. Her life continued to spiral out of control. She would experience several stillbirths. And one day, she would abandon a child in the hospital. That was me. I was born addicted to opiates and treated for neonatal abstinence syndrome, opiate addiction, a condition caused by exposure to drugs in the womb. Doctors use medicine and what they call TLC, tender loving care, consisting of loving care, swaddling, rocking, skin-to-skin contact to treat this condition. But in my case, there was no mother, there was no father, there was no aunt, there was no uncle to provide that care. Instead, nurses tended to me for weeks until I was placed in foster care. Then I bounced between foster homes, reportedly neglected, abused, and malnourished until I was about 3. I was transracially adopted by a white Mormon family in Utah who changed my birth name and raised me in a predominantly white community where I faced frequent racism in my immediate family and my extended family, despite efforts of my parents trying to provide me with a loving home. I recall Christmas morning, dancing to Can't Touch This by MC Hammer. I remember camping trips and hunting and hours upon hours of church. However, I've never forgotten my newly designated grandfather refusing to look at me, to touch me, or to talk to me. On Halloween one year, a teenager called me a racial slur and spit in my face as he ran by and took something from me. Not surprisingly, I struggled from the start in my new home and was diagnosed with reactive attachment disorder and ADHD. I experienced controversial treatments such as holding therapy, where you are agitated to a point of agitation and then held as a form of bonding. It's now illegal. By the time I was 5, I had developed an addiction to codeine that was in cough syrup. I went to a rehabilitation center for children when I was 5. By the time I hit my teen years, 13 through 18, I was in and out of detention centers and back in foster care, attending individual and group therapy. This is where the seeds of resilience were planted. I was what staff would call therapized, meaning I'd been in too many sessions and I could tell you what you wanted to hear. And I would recall my therapist, Liz, touching my head and touching my heart, saying, take that from here to here, in a way to inspire me to feel my feelings as a young boy that didn't cry. Through these programs, I learned how deeply hurt I was and about the coping mechanisms that I was sabotaging my happiness with. However, my therapist ingrained in me that we all have ups and downs, yet choices have consequences, and that there are 2 paths that I can take: the easy and fast, or the harder but worth it. By the time I graduated high school, I'd earned an educational scholarship and was ready to pursue a degree in psychology to be a therapist, just like the therapists before me, and help others. While the journey had already been tough, in getting here, it seemed like I was finally on a steady path. But life had other plans. Shortly after starting college, I found out my girlfriend was pregnant, and we got married, 19. Growing up Mormon, premarital sex, and a child out of wedlock, very taboo. Hence, stepping up to get married to protect the family that I started. 2 weeks after my wedding, my adoptive father passed away. My adoptive mother then presented me with a letter from the state of California stating that I had 6 siblings. I remember sitting at a college library, going on to MySpace. You remember that, right? And sending this blackface a message. Reconnecting with my mother was something I searched for my entire life. My entire life. I was always searching her name in phone books, dreaming she was around the next corner, or excited that the next black face was going to be family. I was excited, but also still hurt. But for her, it brought up shame and the abandonment around abandoning a child and now having to answer to me. We all took some steps forward as a family, but they were slow, and sometimes we had to take some steps back over the years. And while I connected with my biological family virtually, I finally experienced the joy of actually meeting my own flesh and blood, my son, DeMarcus, who was born 2007 on the 4th of July. And it was beautiful. I was one of those parents who read What to Expect When You're Expecting. And when my son arrived, I was more than excited to try my hand at fatherhood. I enlisted in the Army in early 2008, in an effort to provide well for my family after losing my job. And soon after, we welcomed our second son, Trayzon, that year. I was stationed at Fort Stewart, Georgia, as a cavalry scout, still drawing upon the lessons learned in my teens. The military also taught me the values of loyalty, of duty, of respect, of selfless service, of honor, of integrity, and most of all, personal courage. Amid all of this, my sister called me one day, telling me that my cousin had been murdered back in Compton. Although on active duty, I was issued special leave to attend the funeral. This would be the first time that I would meet anybody in my family. I met my mother, I met my father, I met my cousins, I met my 6 siblings, all at one time at a funeral. Now I was glad to be home, finally, but confused about who I was and actually scared to face my mom, as months previously she had called me for some money, and I later realized she was still going through her addiction. As a cavalry scout with the 3rd Infantry Division, 5th Battalion, 7th Cavalry, I deployed to Baghdad, Iraq at 21. On hundreds of missions, I saw firsthand the ugliness of war. I saw firsthand the strength and resilience of soldiers and innocent civilians, as well as the precious value of life. After leaving active duty at 22, I joined the National Guard as a chaplain's assistant. I moved to Boston and to pursue my new life's calling after the military. I went back to school and graduated from Southern New Hampshire University. I have a bachelor's degree in business administration, and more recently, I've started my master's in organizational leadership. During the pandemic, I was furloughed from a government agency, and determined to survive and provide for my family, I invested my 401k, my stocks, and savings into starting my own business. Leaving the corporate world was scary. I needed benefits and I needed insurance, but I also needed to find the true calling of me as a father. And by now, I also had my daughter, Azalea. At one point, in dire need, I discovered a Facebook group called Dads with Daughters by a nonprofit called Fathering Together. This was like the first time that I'd ever had a fathers only support group where we talked about being as intentional about being connected to our children as we did about our executive roles in the workplace. I founded the Comeback Kid Mentorship Program, soon to be a nonprofit as we speak, which combines social emotional learning, mentorship, and a community of resources to inspire and teach resilience to at-risk youth, many of whom are transracial adoptees or in the juvenile justice system, just like I was. In the last 4 years, I personally mentored over 50 youth, from personalized interventions, group sessions, or serving on the board of On Your Feet Foundation, who provides support to birth mothers who have given their children up for adoption. I also co-own Vet Run Movers, a moving and junk removal company. We partner with veteran organizations to support at-risk and homeless veterans and provide second chances to felons through workforce development programs.
Hey, I'm Lloyd.
And I'm Natasha, and
We're the founders of Midnight Comic. Fiber allows us to take our dreams and make it a reality.
So how did I get here? I've mentioned resilience a few times or two, but it was resilience, 4 sources of it, in fact, as described to me by my childhood therapist, that got me here. Here's what they taught me and what you can focus on too, no matter what you're facing. There's relational resilience. This is the ability to draw motivation from others and from the responsibilities you have to others. Despite the challenges, I found strength throughout my own life, through my relationships, from the nurses who cared for me as an infant, my adoptive family, caseworkers, therapists, and mentors like Christian. I've had the same therapist for the last 7 years. But to be real with you, the moment I knew my trajectory had changed was when I became a father. These connections motivated me to keep going, and I knew what was possible. Next up is street resilience. Growing up, I faced discrimination, poverty, and the pain of poor choices. But instead of letting those experiences crush me, I used them as fuel to push forward. My street experiences taught me toughness and determination. And then there's resource resilience. Resilience can be strengthened by accessing the resources around you, both visible and invisible. For me, it was finding educational opportunities, attending therapy, and even rediscovering my biological family, because identity is important. And finally, rock bottom resilience. Even at my lowest points, I believed in my ability no matter the circumstances. No matter how hard life got, I never gave up. I fought hopelessness. I fought PTSD. I fought survivor's grief and kept moving forward. Now, this belief that you can rise from rock bottom is what I want to leave you here with today. Resilience is not something that we are born with. It's something that we learn. And it's a skill built over time through hardship, perseverance, and faith in ourselves. And it's available to anyone willing to fight for it. But here's the thing. We have to be willing to be open to it, with our hearts and minds open, and actually do the work. And with my therapist's help, I was. Now, that doesn't mean everything's gone smoothly as I moved forward by any means. I've been through failed marriages, and honestly, the pain of co-parenting long distance is tough. They say we are babies raising babies, and I can definitely attest to that. But today, I'm a proud father of 3. DeMarcus is now 17 and finishing his licensed nursing assistant program and holds down a great job. Trayvon is a sports star, muscular, handsome. And Azalea, my princess, is 10. She loves dancing, singing, and African hand drumming. You know, people always told me I'd be dead or in jail. And throughout my teenage years, I definitely tested that, but I tested it again when I deployed to Iraq in 2009. Fast forward to 2021, when my big sister flew me back to Los Angeles for my 33rd birthday. We went to my mother's house. And for the first time, she and I sat on her bed and snuggled. She opened up to me about the moment she had to leave at the hospital. Oof. When I was born. How I clung to her hospital gown. And how much it broke her heart. But now her wounds have healed, and they're healing. I got sick the night before my birthday, and my mom, being the nurturing figure that I had always known, but not always knew, took care of me and got me some medicine. And now here we are in 2024, celebrating our first year clean. So I stand here today, living proof that kids like me can come back stronger. By drawing on our resilience and recognizing the consequences of the choices we do have. Life is hard, really hard, right? We've got to heal and then advocate for ourselves. And then resilience and discipline will carry you to nirvana. Thank you.
Thank you, Cordan.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you. Who's got the tissues?
I'm here too. So much, and the accomplishment of it was important for us to see how much you put into that. And I know people might say, wow, that's a big thing to have put together and to have memorized and to have delivered. I know you delivered that because I remember wishing I could have gone just to hear you say this because I knew it was coming up and I knew I couldn't make it. I kind of wonder what it was like in the room for you when you delivered this.
You know, I had the honor of having my childhood therapist, Liz, and my group home staff director fly from Utah to personally sit with me during my talk. So I was in a whole nother space of, ah, I tell you, the talk itself almost didn't get done. I definitely had my moments of procrastination and talking to my mom. Yeah, talking to my mom through some of this stuff. Um, the factual information I gave you, I just learned. So it was kind of learning it on the spot and digesting it, and then figuring out how to tell her story. So to have my childhood therapist who first saw me at 13 with no emotions and shut off from the world, and my therapist to have them present as well as just friends who were there to hear the story was an absolute honor. I think most of all, I have 6 siblings still, and just to be able to tell our story feels good. Excuse me. Jeez.
Yeah, you're a man of great heart, as I can personally attest to. And I have met your wonderful daughter, and uh, I saw the joyful interactions between the two of you and how much she loves you and admires you. And that was a fun time. Just I'll recover myself, don't worry. We both will together. Yeah, I feel like the things that want to come out of me are expressions of gratitude for you to have put together something that I think is so powerful. And I've seen this all over the place. I've seen it all over LinkedIn. I've seen it all over Facebook. It's obviously on YouTube. Uh, People must reach out to you when they watch it. What are some of the things you hear?
It's very well received. Um, I did get a standing ovation, which was absolutely beautiful to witness. Um, but just to hear the stories, to meet other adoptees, it has been a beautiful journey. Just to hear the professionals along the way, um, and at the same time, it's kind of been gut-wrenching in a sense to say. People have come forward and have talked to me about certain things in my childhood. Uh, Sometimes things that I thought I might have been a little crazy for. Um, so just confirming some things, um, yeah, it kind of opened more, I guess, that next chapter to the adoptee fog.
When I introduced you, I mentioned you as a father, and then the second thing I put in was an adoptee. And that's of course how I came to know you as an adoptee when we were in Fireside together. And you mentioned within the talk that a lot of the at-risk youth that you work with, that you meet a lot of adoptees, a lot of transracial adoptees. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, about the impact you've had there?
Yeah, absolutely. It's come through different spaces. So I first told my story during the pandemic 2021. Um, when I first went on Facebook, I don't know why, I was just inclined to tell my adoption story and to meet other adoptees. And I think this was the first time I ever heard the excuse me. This is the first time I ever heard the word transracial adoption. I had never heard that called that before. But I also had kind of stopped talking about my adoption for the most part. And so at that point, it was like a hashtag. And then I was meeting other adoptees. And then I met Fireside adoptees, and I met you, and I met so many people along the way who are adopted, who are invisible in this world, who are not invisible, but we don't always identify as adoptees. So it just felt like this immediate home. I felt comfortable enough to kind of share my story. And I had some parents on Facebook hear my story and messaged me and asked me if I would mentor their family. At the time, I wasn't mentoring at all. I hadn't really thought about it. So it was more just like sharing my story and kind of building it from there with my first client who was in Nebraska, a transracial adopted family who were just going through life as we all do and just needed some direction. Um, I had another family that was from, I think, up north again, and they moved to Louisiana purposefully to have more culture around their child. And so they were in their new place, and it was more mentorship on how to connect to the area, how to connect in their community, and just to have a positive space and face to interact with. And so from there, it's just become working with families. Sometimes I get calls from schools, I get calls from other programs to mentor. And then recently I have launched more of a group mentoring sessions here in Manchester, New Hampshire. And I'm currently in the, thank you, currently in the search phase for that, of course, the outreach phase. Um, and that's open to all, not just transracial adoptees or adoptees, period. But I find when most people hear my story, those are the people that are more interested in the mentoring. So most kids are system involved. I work with Suffolk County. Suffolk County is out here in Massachusetts. So the DA's office, I just finished onboarding them onto my mentoring program and curriculum. And we are doing diversion work with Boston University and 70 kids in a diversion program. So just doing alternative sentencing work and criminal reform. And yeah,
Your face is all over the place here. This is a humble man, but you'll see him on TV here. He's appearing on things. He's doing so very modestly, but you're out there. You're with people in administrative capacities, people who can help shape the lives of children. And I see you placing yourself in that context for maximum outreach for people. And I just imagine I hope the response has been really strong and overwhelming for that.
it definitely has. This year has been very opening, connecting with these organizations, meeting other adoptees. I just like to meet people and hear their stories. I am an everyday person. I'm walking around. I was at your gym earlier. I'm a normal everyday dude. And I really just love connecting with people. And I am very grateful for the author that we call Source or God who wrote my story the way they did, because, when I needed to fall back on something, it was my identity. And it is affirming to be here, period. And to be well, but to be received.
Thank you, Corey. Yeah,
So,
that's wonderful, and appreciate
stop crying.
it. Then you beat me to it. The stop.
Yeah.
I'm surprised I've stopped. I did want to ask you, and your webpage has a lot of powerful information about you in addition to what was shared here, and we hope we'll put that up so people can know where to find you and the different places you are. You mentioned growing up not within the culture that you were born into,
Yeah.
and what that must have been like for you. And that's a theme, of course, for adoptees like me to learn from people who have gone through that experience. So I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that and what it's like to emerge into culture now for you.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I not to sound traumatically positive, but I think the outcome I see today being a transracial adoptee is I'm very balanced. I think our world can be very separated in colors and identities. Um, so growing up in this space, being the only Black child until, excuse me, if I tell the story correctly, there was, I grew up with three other transracial adoptees. My adoptive parents did some foster care before me. If anybody's familiar with Utah, excuse me, Utah had a foster care program for the Native American population. And so my parents were very much involved in the church in that process previous to me, and had other families, another family that my mother was close with who had three transracial adoptees. Um, and I did not have a very good experience with them at all. Uh, I won't say too much, but it was a very traumatic experience with those three kids. Um, excuse me. If you, um, but you know, I know my parents did their best to make it a loving home. I feel like some of the extreme things that I experienced came from a psychologist. Like they were reaching out for help, and a psychologist said that holding therapy would be good therapy for this child. Uh, so I think experiencing the different ways they were going about treating actual trauma was pretty messed up in my life. Um, I also have I don't talk about him much, but I have a brother, Britt. So he's a year older than me. He was adopted, I think, 2 years before me, and he is white as well. And we just have like a very parallel life. We were just like the only two black kids, excuse me, black and white kid, like twins, brothers. That is my everything. He stood up for me. He fought for me. Um, loved me, accepted me. You know, we were both adoptees, so like that was always good to have between each other. It's like we both knew that we were from other parents. We were very close. We relate on, we understand what we went through, which is great to talk about. However, he hasn't been as welcoming to um, his story. And I say that now because he went on to have addiction up until he's just celebrated 2 years clean last week. And that started shortly after. Correct, yes. You know, I was one of those that I was like, I needed to know my mom. Excuse me, we both knew our stories. Like we could go to our mom and dad and like, what was my story and what was this story? And they would tell us. But I was always like in the phone book looking up names, and he was never too interested in that. And so as we talk today about how our lives turned out in that trajectory, um, I always needed to know the, for better or worse, I needed to know where I was from. And so I always pursued that, where he just was, I'm okay here, I'm good. And he'll tell you now, not pursuing it has hurt his heart in many ways. And now he is finally last month he just did his DNA and found some of his adoptive family for the first time, and he's 38. So we're now it's like I get to guide him through
Yeah.
this adoption
You've gone
fog.
through, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And
Um,
you
yeah,
mentioned the fog too. And this we have discussions in adoptee groups about the fog all the time. For people who don't know much about that. I guess everybody has their own definition of it. For me, it was an awareness of the impact of adoption that I'd kind of had blissfully sailed through for my whole life. And suddenly I was like, I can't believe this happened to me. And I was feeling the loss and um, the separation and the fact that yes, I was loved, but I there was so many things I would never have, could never regain. And so, that can lead to a lot of introspection in deep places, sometimes really dark places. And the community can be a great place to work those things out. Do you find that even as a transracial adoptee, that the impact of the fog is something that still gets cleared away in layers for you?
I think the last part you said cleared away in layers.
Yeah,
But I mean, I think I reached this point where I think I know everything about adoption or my own adoption, and then another layer, like giving my TED talk, and then people contact me and I find out another layer. So it's kind of like it does rip that wound. It opens that wound and you kind of gotta reprocess. So I don't know. It's a lifelong journey.
sure is.
Um, yeah, it is a lifelong journey. Um, and I am grateful for my version of being able to find my mother, to have these conversations, to witness my siblings, the six siblings that grew up with my mother, and the struggles that she had. And they lived through those. So it's one of those like you're adopted, you're better off, but you hear the other six and you hear their story of growing up with mom, and I just wanted mom. So it's a conundrum, really. Would I have rather been home or would I have rather been adopted? Or, I don't know. It's an interesting way to live.
I guess the last thing I'd like to ask you about before we conclude the recording and go to Q&A, private Q&A, is you met everybody all at once, which is about the biggest overwhelming experience I can imagine. I met several at once. I didn't meet all at once. And you
Yes.
met them under really solemn circumstances too, and so much emotionally to process. How did you come away from that? And you mentioned in that same breath, you said you were confused about who you were after that. I can imagine that. Do you want to talk just for a minute about that a little more?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was at, I think maybe I was about 20. So it'd been about 2 years of reconnection with my biological family. Um, Specifically when it comes to my biological family, I have an older sister. So I have two older sisters and then four younger, two sisters and two brothers. My older sisters I'm closest with because we're the oldest ones. But honestly, it has been a crazy experience to just sit together and realize how sometimes similar we are, but we didn't grow up together. Like, yes, we're very different, but like the things that I do, my mannerisms, like if anybody knows like science, like you turn out to be very much naturally like your DNA. And so it was like sitting with these people, these seven siblings, which I have, older and younger for the first time. And it's like, we look like each other. I look just like my mom if you didn't see. So being the child that was never there to like pop up and they're like, holy crap, yes, that's definitely your child. You can't deny. I am the male version of my mother. Our voices are kind of the same. We have the same mannerisms. Every time my sister talks to me, she's like, ugh, you remind me of mom. In a good way, but just on mannerisms. Yes, genetic mirroring. It is a beautiful gift to witness. Ah, yes. So it's beautiful to have those mirrors. Yeah, in fact, the other day I talked to my third cousin for the first time. I found out that my family does those awesome big black reunions where they have like everybody's there in their shirts and like I didn't know that I had that. Like always wanted it. Come to find out, like I have that, and they've been doing it for the last 52 years. So to be finally connected into that is beautiful. I just missed last year's, but there's one more in LA next year. And me and my family are taking that on, which is awesome. But she showed me somebody in the family did our family tree, and it goes back to the 1700s. And we have pictures back to the 1900s of these beautiful faces that I don't know, I might have missed out on otherwise if I just minded my business, you know? So to still be getting these affirmations, to still be connecting to family, uh, it's beautiful. So
just want to talk about where people can follow you, get in touch with you, and learn more about what you're doing.
absolutely. Well, if you search me, do not search James Cordan. I am Cordan James. Cordan, Cordan James. I need to get that Google SEO going because every time you Google me, James Corden pops up, and I'm
Hmm.
not him, and he's been canceled, so don't search him.
But
But anywhere that you look, Cordan James will pop up. Anything. It may add my last name, Cordan James Havron. That will give you much more extensive because you have to use your full name in newspaper stuff. Um, so yeah, CordanJames.com has just about everything. You can see more about my programs. You can see my fatherhood program that's starting up, and hear some of my discussions. And yeah,
yeah, some great
yes.
stuff in the chat.
Oh, the chat is amazing. I didn't even get
Nature,
to.
nature over nurture in a lot of ways, right? Much more powerful than nurture. Yeah.
Oh
So,
yeah.
Gordon, I just wondered if you had a final word for everybody before we switch to Q&A. I think there's probably people that are eager to talk with you.
Ah, I don't even have anything to say. I want to hear all your stories and meet all of you. That is what fills my cup. And I'll cry again. But just that connection is important. Um, and we have a superpower, I am learning. The way that we can navigate through the world, we may be shadow born, but we are here. We are not invisible. We are beautiful people. We are loved and worthy. So thank you for allowing me to share this time with you.
Thank you, Gordon. Great man. Appreciate you very much. I think we will include our recorded section here. And again, thanks so much for being here with us and for everybody who's come out to support Gordon.